Zelensky is cracking down on Ukrainian corruption, finally getting rid of an oligarch with inconvenient connections to the world's clumsiest laptop owner, Hunter, as well as making the country ready for the post-war reconstruction. Probably time for peace any minute now. War with China! Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards truth and freedom, where we have to pull together an incredibly diverse set of facts, data from all over the place. Keep our eyes open, be aware of our own biases, media bias, institutional bias, the interests of the powerful. We put all this stuff together, we share it with you, you tell us what you think, and we grow together. That's what news should be, not old school, what does the government want us to think? What's most convenient for the world's most powerful interest? We'll just think that then. Although this story is becoming more fascinating by the day because powerful people are getting involved and powerful interests are being affected. Zelensky is kicking out corrupt government officials, an oligarch with ties to Hunter Biden, all presumably to prepare Ukraine for the post-war 100% digital utopia that territory is being prepared for. You will be fascinated to know that one person commentating on all this is the world's favorite philanthropist who has no interest but helping people, Mr. Not Friends with Epstein, just had dinner with him. Bill Gates had this to say about Ukraine.
You know, the Ukrainian government is one of the worst in the world.
Oh, but Zelensky, hero, Zelensky.
You know, corrupt, controlled by a few rich people. I mean, really.
Oh, that sounds terrible. Do you know what I hate, Bill, is when rich people use their influence to direct outcomes of I don't know, global pandemics, agriculture, stuff like that. Does that get on your nerves?
I mean, really unfortunate for the people in Ukraine. Ukraine has better agricultural land than the United States does.
Well, you'd know. You fucking own most of it.
I mean, it is the breadbasket of Europe. It's an incredible location.
If only there was some way we could get our hands on it.
Hopefully, post-war, as it gets rebuilt, you know, it'll first come up to Eastern European levels, then eventually European levels.
There's a very presumptuous way of looking at the world and a very presumptuous position to prescribe how events will unfold. That is real power. And not only that, that's real power when it's not aware of how powerful it's being. It's just unconsciously describing how global events will unfold.
So it's a country that has a lot of promise.
Lot of promise. And I promise I'm going to take some of it. Okay, so you heard Bill Gates just then. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt governments in the world. Remember, I'm not saying that Ukrainian people shouldn't be helped. Of course they bloody well should be helped. It's terrible, terrible that they're suffering in this war. But saying Ukraine was corrupt, back in 2015, even mainstream media news outfits would tell you, look at this headline. It was accepted that it was a corrupt country. And in fact, the 2014 coup, you know about this stuff now, don't you? You know about how complex their politics is. So we're not dealing with just Ukraine are the goodies and Russia are the baddies. It's a bit more complicated than that. So it shouldn't be turned into a saccharine Hollywood narrative with Zelensky turning up at the Golden Globes and being given Oscars for a war.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of the 80th Golden Globe Award ceremony.
The Golden Globes, at best, is a frivolous, hopeless, awful waste of time. Gratifying it with the presence of a political leader during a war. It was a really curious event. But this has been a curious war. Do you remember that Sean Penn literally gave Zelensky an Oscar?
This is for you. Oh, Sean. Yes.
No. Please. It's the blurring of the line between entertainment and military activity. You can see how a concrescence of elite interests are corralling that nation. And the people that are truly suffering are Ukrainian people. And even after the war, they'll continue to suffer because part of the conditions for the kind of partnerships with the corporations they're dealing with will be that Ukrainian workers won't be able to unionize, there'll be controls on their pay, controls on their conditions. The utopia is for the elites. The dystopia is for Ukrainian people.
This morning, Ukraine's government is in the midst of a purge. Several senior officials, including the deputy defense minister, have resigned amid sweeping corruption allegations.
First thing, let's get rid of all of this Ukrainian corruption so that we can bring in those uncorrupt organizations like BlackRock and the military-industrial complex, get things all nice and clean and shiny, and get rid of any oligarchs who might turn up on a certain laptop. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Justin, how do you say that properly?
Hello, Volodymyr.
Recently announced the dismissal of more than a dozen governors, deputy ministers, and even his deputy advisor. Ukraine undertook searches of government buildings and the homes of high-profile ministers ministers and oligarchs as part of a clampdown on corruption. The move came ahead of a gathering of European leaders in Kiev to discuss Ukraine's path towards EU membership. So the agenda that Russia were concerned about is being pursued in plain sight. Ukraine are being integrated in the EU. They are a de facto member of NATO, as a, former defence minister said, because he's one of the poor bastards who's been ousted now, probably for saying stuff like that. Zelensky is determined to show that Kiev can be a safe steward for billions of dollars in allied aid, and also a safe place for Western investment. Western investment? Anyone in particular?
BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs.
I wonder why those corporations are so interested in investing in Ukraine. Zelensky's government has imposed some of the world's most aggressive anti-worker policies, passing legislation that deprives around 73% of workers of their right to union protection and collective bargaining. But the thing about Ukrainian politicians is they tell you it how it is. If they are de facto members of NATO, they will just let you know. Like Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov.
Ukraine became the member of NATO de facto. It's true. It's a fact. And I'm sure that in the next future we will become the member of NATO de jure.
So that was what Russia's concern always was, that Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, that Patriot missiles would be placed in Ukraine, that Russia would have on their border hostile forces. We were told continually this wasn't a proxy war because a proxy war would mean World War III. That's what Joe Biden said. But we've heard people in Congress and even Biden himself allude to escalations of tension and more military aid being given. And again, our man, the recently sacked, incidentally, Alexei, tells us that Ukraine are spilling blood, basically in exchange for weapons and support.
Виконуємо місію НАТО сьогодні без втрати їхньої крові, з втратою нашої крові. Тому для них треба витрачати їх зброю.
Zelensky might be bringing new systems into Ukraine. I'm bringing new systems into my body, and you should too. Have a look at this. I know you. You'd like to drop those leftover pandemic pounds that you put on during the pandemic because you were sad inside because of the pandemic. But how sick are you also of all the ads for weight loss pills and fad diets that probably don't even work anyway and might make your feet change colour? I've been there. I've done that. They don't work. They're a con. They're a trick. It's skullduggery. Do you know what actually works? Eating 5 healthy servings of fruit and vegetables every single day. But who among us has time to prepare that every single day? This brings us around to Field of Greens. Field of Greens is a science-backed formula of specific fruits and vegetables you won't find in any other product. Proper nutrition reboots your metabolism so you can burn calories faster and lose weight a healthier way, and Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. Yes, you'll look and feel healthier fast, but the greater proof comes at your next checkup when the doctor goes, whatever you're doing, keep it up. Okay, let's get you started with 15% off your first order. Visit brickhouserussell.com, promo code BRAND. That's brickhouserussell.com, promo code BRAND. And now, let's go back to that deep, intelligent piece of media critique analysis that you were just watching. Alexei Reznikov, under pressure from a corruption scandal, is to be reshuffled into another government. How many governments they got? Reznikov, one of Ukraine's better-known figures internationally, has been under threat after it emerged the Defence Ministry paid 2 or 3 times the supermarket price of food to supply troops on the front line. That is the least of their concerns. 70% of the weapons they're getting sent, they don't know where the bloody hell they are. But it's not just occasionally clumsily truthful government ministers who are being reshuffled out of sight and out of mind. Oligarchs are getting their just desserts too. Ukrainian state security officials searched the home of billionaire businessman Ihor Kolomoisky on Wednesday in what several media outlets said was an investigation into possible financial crimes. Kolomoisky, heard of him somewhere. The significance of the story regarding Zelensky turning on his longtime patron and Kolomoisky's other significant ties was entirely buried by foreign and state media, with most merely referring to the situation as another in a series of anti-corruption actions. So that's how the media will report on this, anti-corruption rather than corruption, because if this is anti-corruption, it means that what preceded it was corruption. What's been going on in Ukraine since 2014 has to be called corruption. And if, for example, you found out that this oligarch had ties to a significant American political figure, what would that be? A quick rundown on why Mr. Kolomoisky is significant. He owned Burisma. I've heard of them somewhere. Where do they crop up? Oh, No! Burisma employed Hunter Biden. When the story about that laptop was being censored from social media in case it influenced the outcome of the presidential election, how would you have felt if you had known that not only it was true, down the line there would be a war between Ukraine and Russia, which amounts to a proxy war due to the amount of American aid, 100 billion, and what's going on with the defense industry, that Hunter Biden worked for one of the energy companies whose former owner, leader, boss, CEO has just been ousted because of corruption. How would you feel about that? Imagine this was a Trump story. I wouldn't ever deny the story that Russia is aggressive, has its own imperial intentions, or that Putin is an aggressor and a tyrant. All of that, you know, another day we could tell you that story. But that story is being pretty reliably told, I would have thought, and consistently told. But the story that Ukraine is resource rich is being piloted for all sorts of globalist ideas, surveillance, that the workers are being primed and groomed so that big companies like BlackRock can get in there and heavily invest, that there are ties to the American political establishment that are historic, that the military-industrial complex are benefiting, that peace deals have been on the table and have been interrupted, disrupted, and put off, presumably because all this stuff is beneficial. Put this information together, like what Bill Gates has just said, what you've seen happening over the last few years, the inability of the mainstream media to report on all this stuff. What does it tell you? Also, this guy, Kolomoisky, financed Zelensky's entire television, business, and political career, including his rise to the presidency. He's going to be pretty pissed off about this. I paid for all those piano lessons, and you still don't do it right! He once funded Ukrainian militias, but later argued that Kiev should engage in a détente with Russia. This part is critical as Kolomoisky's good standing with the West shifted dramatically after this decision. What is it about Kolomoisky that's most annoying? His ties to Hunter Biden and the potential embarrassment that could cause, or the fact that he's calling for peace? Hunter Biden, very embarrassing. Calling for peace, very costly. Since then, he became subject of an FBI probe and US sanctions. Oh, be friends with Hunter Biden all you like, but you start calling for peace, get me the FBI! He has since had his assets seized and nationalized by the Ukrainian government and has been stripped of his Ukrainian citizenship despite being born in Ukraine and living his entire life in Ukraine. Call yourself a Ukrainian? Well, I was born here. I lived my whole life here. I did all my business deals with Hunter Biden here. Yeah, but then you called for peace. Give me that citizenship! So it's pretty clear that inconvenient figures are being swept off of the international stage prior to the advent of this colossal investment project for post-war Ukraine and the intention to make it 100% digital.
Building a new Ukraine together, brave and digital.
But the fact is this war is all Russia's fault. Russia are the sole aggressor, and there's not ever been an opportunity for peace anyway, and if there was, I'm sure everyone would take it. Who doesn't want peace over war? Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said in an interview posted to his YouTube channel on Saturday that the US and its Western allies blocked his efforts of mediating between Russia and Ukraine to bring an end to the war in its early days. Discussing how Western leaders felt about his mediation efforts, Bennett said the then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson took an aggressive line against peace. When asked if the Western powers blocked the mediation efforts, Bennett said basically yes, they blocked it and I thought they were wrong. So there you are. There was an opportunity for peace. Apparently conditions had been substantially set. So I suppose another way of looking at the Ukraine-Russia conflict is too many powerful interests converge around this idea, whether it's the resource-rich Ukraine, the ability to try out new technologies, the opportunity for investment, the opportunity to try out weapons, the opportunity to challenge and drain and destabilize Russia. All of these things are factors. Now we're seeing Ukraine being prepped for the next phase. Get rid of oligarchs with ties to Hunter Biden or any other embarrassing ties. Clean up government corruption so that Ukraine can be a great place, not for Ukrainian people, not for the Ukrainian people that we're supposed to be protecting, not the Ukrainian people who are used to rouse sentiment and love and humanitarianism and exactly the kind of things we should be feeling, but to make things better for corporate globalist investment in the post-war Ukraine, which is being advertised as 100% digital and 100% amenable to corporate interests. So you tell me what you think this war is about. Is it about helping Ukrainian people, or is it just part of a globalist agenda in which too many interests converged to resist the opportunity? Let me know in the comments, let me know in the chat. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Turn on the notification bell and subscribe right now so you are directed towards the content we make every single day, but more important than any of that, please stay free.